Hello everyone, Mr. Chantry here, your neighborhood planetarium director, with the March 2021 edition of Evening Sky Excursions, where I show you what to find in the sky this month. In March, sometimes people say that March comes in like a lion and out like a lamb. That's usually referring to the meteorological changes, or changes in the weather patterns that we see during this time of the year, where we tend to transition from the fierce, stormy winter season into a little bit of the gentler spring season with rain, getting ready for everything to grow in April. Now, in astronomy, sometimes we say that March comes in with a lion and out with a ram. We'll get to that when we get into our evening sky. There are lots of changes happening this month, not just in the weather patterns, but also in the sky. On the 14th of the month, we actually have our daylight savings time, where we spring forward 1 hour. This is often confused as some sort of astronomical aspect that has to do with this, and actually daylight savings time has nothing to do with the daytime or nighttime sky. This is totally a human-made concept of how we keep track of time, and a bunch of people just agreeing to change the clock certain times during the year. But on the 20th, we do have an astronomical change from winter to spring, which is the vernal or spring equinox. This is when the Earth is in a position around the sun where the north and south poles don't tilt towards or away from the sun. Another way to think of this is if you were standing on the equator on the equinox, the sun would be directly over your head at noon. This is also the time during the year when everywhere on the planet Earth experiences just about 12 hours of daytime and 12 hours of nighttime. With the clock springing forward, in the beginning of the month, the sun will set around 6:30, whereas at the end of the month, the sun will be setting at about 7:30. This 1 hour difference as we spring the clocks forward. That means there's probably not going to be too many more opportunities to get in some stargazing before dinner time. You'll have to wait until about 8:15 until the sky is dark enough to see some stars. This is a great opportunity to see some of the constellations and stars in our winter sky very brightly against the sky. We're going to go until about 8 p.m. at night. When you go out, you want to find the direction south to face. If you have a smartphone, you can use the compass on your smartphone to find south. If not, just take note of the direction where the sun is setting. That is roughly west. Then, you're going to want to face the direction where the sun was setting and make a 90-degree or half turn to your left. Here we are, looking south at about 8 p.m. By this time, the sky should be sufficiently dark to see many of the constellations that I'm going to point out here. In the beginning of the video, I talked about March coming in with a lion and out with a ram. That's because there's one constellation rising in the east, Leo the lion, and one constellation getting ready to set in the west, which is Aries the ram. These two constellations perfectly bookend our winter sky constellations that are marked by a lot of relatively bright stars packed into a relatively small region of the sky. The easiest way to start examining the winter sky here in March is to look for the brightest star in our northern skies here just about at 8 p.m. right above the southern horizon, which is the star Sirius. This star stands out as much brighter than any of the stars in the sky. Going from this star in the south, Sirius, if you go up and to the right, you should find a slightly dimmer, still relatively bright reddish-orange star named Betelgeuse. And then to the left of Betelgeuse, you should be able to find another relatively bright star named Procyon. These three stars mark out an asterism, or shape that we make in the sky, called the Winter Triangle. It looks like a equilateral triangle with all of the sides relatively the same, and it's marked out by these three stars and is pretty easy to find. Each one of these stars is in a different constellation, so you can find 3 constellations just from finding this triangle. To mark out more of the sky, we can actually find the Winter Hexagon, which is a 6-sided shape with 6 bright stars in 6 different constellations. It's sometimes called the Winter Hexagon or the Winter Football because of how it's kind of shaped. So again, we start in the south. We look for this brightest star in the sky, Sirius, directly above the south. We're going to go to the right again, but we're not going to go up and to the right. We're going to go kind of parallel with the horizon to the right. And we're going to come to a relatively bright bluish white star named Rigel, which is one of the bottom feet of Orion the Hunter. We'll get there. Then we're going to keep going up and to the right until we find a bright reddish orange colored star. This one's called Antares, which is the eye of Taurus the bull. Then we're going to go high just a little bit past directly overhead and find this bright yellowish gold star named Capella. Now we're going to go down and to the left and we're going to find this relatively bright star named Pollux. Then almost straight down towards the south again, we're once again going to get to Procyon and then finish it back to Sirius here. Here we can see the bright stars of the Winter Hexagon, or the Winter Football, as you might call it, marked out here. Each one of these stars is in a separate constellation. We'll start off down here with Sirius, which is sometimes called the Dog Star, and one of the reasons it's called that is because it's in a dog-shaped constellation named Canis Major. The next star, Rigel, is in one of probably the most noticeable and famous constellations, Orion the Hunter, which has that star Betelgeuse that we use to mark out the winter triangle here. Then going up, Aldebaran marks out the eye of Taurus the bull. Going up, we have Capella, the goat herder. Coming back down, Pollux marks out one of the twins of Gemini. The twin brother Castor is right next to him in the sky. And then Procyon marks out another dog constellation in the sky of Canis Minor. So these 6 constellations are the constellations of the winter sky. And you can find them by finding that winter triangle and then expanding it out to that winter hexagon. The winter sky with its relatively bright stars make it fairly easy to find this group of constellations, and it's fun to sit out and see how many of these 6 you can actually pick out. Orion being in the center is probably the easiest to spot, with the 3 relatively bright stars in a relatively straight line that mark out what we call Orion's belt. From there, if you go up from Orion's belt, if you would imagine a line through this, you'll get to that Aldebaran. Look for the V shape of this little star cluster that we call the Hyades that marks out the rest of the head of the bull. From Orion's belt, if you go down and to the left, you should run into that brightest dog star in the sky, Sirius. And then from Rigel, which is one of Orion's feet, if you go up through the belt, up through Betelgeuse, it should take you to the twins of Castor and Pollux. Finally, Capella is the very, very bright star that's just about straight overhead. If you go outside and look almost straight up, that brightest star up there will be Capella. Orion is probably the most noticeable and recognizable constellation or pattern of stars in the sky. Another noticeable pattern of stars in the sky is actually getting higher and higher in our winter sky as we move from winter into spring. Right now we're facing south to look at our winter sky, but if we turn around 180 degrees and find north, we'll find the familiar asterism of the Big Dipper rising in the sky. The Big Dipper is marked out here by the 3 stars of the handle and the 4 stars that make up the bowl of the Big Dipper. Right now, the Big Dipper is standing up on its handle. It almost looks like a question mark in the sky. For most of the winter, the Big Dipper's been very low to the horizon and may even be blocked out by trees or houses from where you are. But as we move into the spring, it's going to start getting higher and higher in the sky and will be much easier to pick out. So if you go out this month, Face south to find that Winter Hexagon over here in our southern sky, centered with the constellation of Orion in the middle. We have Taurus the Bull, this V shape, up and to his right. One of his hunting dogs, Sirius, and Canis Major down behind him. His other hunting dog, Procyon, following behind. The twins Castor and Pollux up here in the sky. And the goat herder, Auriga, high overhead. Once you find the southern sky, turn around back to the north and see if you can't find that asterism that right now looks like a question mark of the Big Dipper. So that's it for our March evening sky excursions. Much more to come next month. So don't forget to get out there. Make sure you look up and be amazed. And as always, be excellent to each other.